So if you've been following me for a while, you know I love a good analogy. I try to create these to make this information simple, easy to digest, easy to implement. So without further ado, let me introduce CEO and the boss analogy when it comes to understanding these three components of physics, and then how this helps to explain main point one, promoting heel striking to increase forward momentum. Here we go. CEO Cleo, he represents the center of mass. He's the leader. Then we have Boss Betty, or the base of support. Both are on the same team, but CEO Cleo, he's a leader. He's driven. He likes to be out in front. And actually, when he's out in front, things do move faster. Versus Boss Betty, she's more a frontline. She's still upper level management. Great job. She's worked her way up over the years, but she's a little bit more grounded, a little bit more balanced. The two work in unison. And so here's the typical dynamics. If Boss Betty is out in front, she's out leading, it affects the power dynamics. It slows team momentum. Versus when CEO Cleo, the center of mass, is out in front, forward, it speeds up team momentum. So let's look at that a little bit more closely in the gait cycle when this occurs. Let's start in this balanced position. Perfect harmony. CEO Cleo's on top, but they're still working together. All the roles, the hierarchy falls in place. Then we see when the body goes to leave the ground, to propel the body forward, to push the ground back. What happens is CEO Cleo is out in front. He's forward. Boss Betty is backwards. Versus now, when we come to land and load the ground, when we're coming back down from that flight phase, Boss Betty, she's always out in front. She has to. She can't help herself. She has to. But it slows down team momentum. When Boss Betty, when the foot out in front is in front of the center of mass, or CEO Cleo, it slows things down. So we have to ask, can we influence this relationship? Because as we know, the closer the two are together, the less braking. The closer the center of mass, CEO Cleo, and Boss Betty are together, the closer they are, the less braking occurs. And this, of course, we're talking about the taxes, paying the taxes with the ground. And so here down below, we see that distance between the center of mass, base support, CEO Cleo, and Boss Betty. So we've got two options. How can we do this? How can we bring these two closer together? How can we approximate center of mass, CEO Cleo, and Boss Betty, or the base support? There's two ways we can do it. First option, we can bring the leg, or the base support, back closer towards the center of mass, or we can bring the center of mass, CEO Cleo, the body, forward closer to the lead leg or the base support. Just saying that out loud, which of those two options seems most efficient or effective? Running is about moving forward. Would we rather bring the base backwards, or bring our center of mass or our body forward to accomplish the same task of approximating and bringing the two together? So let's see how this works out and how this looks. So option one, bring the leg back, bring the base of support back closer to the center of mass. So what you see down below, landing out in front, landing on the heel, versus picture two, commonly said, bring your foot back, land underneath your body, land flat. This solves the problem of braking. It does decrease braking. It brings the two closer together, but it comes at a cost. We're decreasing the distance traveled each step. Ideally, every time we go to leave the ground, we move horizontal. If we're shortening the amount of distance, we're paying less on the principal. This will come into point number two. It talks about step length. They both work hand in hand together. We're going to have to take more steps to get from point A to point B if we're shortening up this distance travel by bringing the foot back underneath. Versus option two, can we bring the center of mass, the body, CEO Cleo, forward closer to base Betty, or the base support, without sacrificing distance? So we've looked down below. How can we turn this in its simple shape, going from braking, landing on the heel, to making this more efficient, less braking? The lean, the hankle, hinging at the ankle, by merely leaning forward, which we've talked about before, will show continuously, shifting the center of mass forward, CO Cleo forward, closer to Betty. Now we don't sacrifice step length. We can still cover the same amount of ground, but we're bringing the distance closer together. We're approximating, we're decreasing the braking by merely leaning. Option here 1, no leaning. Option 2, leaning. Now we're minimizing braking to help maximize momentum. Let's get a visual on this phenomenon. This is the secret sauce, the X factor, the leaning, all about the leaning. So here at option 2, where we talked about moving our body, our center of mass forward, what does that do? Think of it like this. When you're running, there's this little platform in front of you. It's a safe zone of where you can land and load that minimizes braking. Well, since we don't really have the option here, let's talk about this scenario. If I'm at the edge of a pool, I'm standing on land, and I've got this safe space, this platform, this raft that I can go to. Since I can't really bring it closer to me, I can bring myself closer to the platform. So if you look down below, you see where my center of mass is, right smack dab in the middle of the base support between my arches. By leaning forward, hinging at the ankle, shifting my weight forward more towards the ball of the foot, keeping the heels down. Now I shift my center of mass forward. Now CO, Cleo, Boss Betty are closer together. There's less braking. That's the key, the X factor, hinging at the ankle to move the two closer together. You see the relative change in the difference where the platform stayed the same, but it was the body, the center of mass, that moved forward, bringing the two closer together, not sacrificing distance. This brings us to our next employee. Hank L., Employee of the Year. Fantastic individual. He's been Employee of the Year every single year since starting, 88 to 2023. He loves discomfort. We grow from it. He's a very grounded individual, brings people together. He's got the parking space and everything. Fantastic guy. What he does is he tells Cleo, CEO Cleo, center of mass, hey, let's lean into this. Let's lean into this discomfort. Let's lean forward. I know we have our differences with Boss Betty, how she runs things, but can we bring these things just a little closer together? So Hank L. helps to lean the center mass forward and bring the two closer together. Great guy. Here's the other thing, where to lean. So we talk about leaning, shifting pressure. What we have to unlearn is telling our body, it's okay. It's okay. Hank L. is okay. It's okay to have my weight forward in the base support while we run, while we move forward. Because here's what will normally happen without this training. Down below, we can either hinge at the hips and we have our weight still go back. We're trying to lean forward, but our hips are going back to try to stay centered versus the leaning forward, hinging at the ankles. And this is where the employee comes in of hip E. She's not great. Can't fire her. She's got too many write-ups. She just never goes away. She doesn't come in that often, but she's trouble. She's just bad for business. Slows forward momentum, slows team progress. She's all easy, slow down. There's no rush. Not what Hank's all about. Hank L. Sorry, Hank. She's about leaning, hinging at the hips, a hippie. So the goal is, can we learn to get the center of mass forward by shifting the pressure through the ankles? Going back to the picture that I showed in the beginning and how it's more about the location of where you land versus what part of your foot. Down below, all three images, I'm landing on the heel in all of them. But the difference, the most important difference is, where's my center of mass in relationship to that? It's more about where versus what part of your foot. If you go back to the kickstand analogy, here where we're trying not to let it move forward, we're trying not to let it move, we want to have a contact point outside of the center of mass. It doesn't matter what part of that kickstand, what part of the foot, it's more about the location. Is it outside or not? It's more about location versus what part of the foot. So a quick, simple, easy way, if you're a coach, clinician, if you video yourself, if you watch yourself run, instead of looking at the foot strike, looking at slow motion, just by looking at where their body weight is, tells us everything we need to know. By looking at their torso, imagining like it's like an hour hand of a clock. If they're running left to right, ideally, if they have their weight appropriate, the ankle, their torso is at a 12:30 posture. Versus if they're leaning back, not leaning at all, that's a 12 o'clock posture. So they're forced to land and load in front. Boss Betty further out in front. versus a 1 o'clock posture, the hip E, leaning forward, but the hips are staying back. So my hips are back, my center mass is back, I'm landing and loading in front, braking or slowing down. So I want to finish point number 1 by showing just another representation combining the two of the gait cycle from what it looks like from the side and where the center of mass is in relationship to the base support with these 3 different positions or postures all landing on the heel. We're first starting in this balanced position. Lowest point, arms, legs, thighs equal. Right now, I want to see with the base of support, foot's flat, where is the center of mass? Where is CEO Clio at this exact moment? So if we look at these, option 1, not leaning at all. Weight's back, vertical, 12 o'clock. Where's the weight? Where's the CEO? The center of mass, it's further back. It's towards the heel. Versus now we're starting to lean, but it's at the hips. So it's a little bit further forward, but the hips, the center of mass is still back. So my pressure, the center of mass, is slightly more forward. Versus the ankle, shifting weight, hinging at the ankle, biasing more towards the ball of the foot. Right now, leaning appropriately, 12:30 posture, you can see where my center of mass is more towards the ball of the foot. This doesn't mean that I'm pushing down when I leave the ground. This doesn't mean I'm landing on the forefoot. This is merely where is my weight, where is my balance when I'm in this lowest point balance position. That's it. So now let's look at the flight phase. Leaving the ground, both feet are off the ground. At this point, there's no base support, but we can see where is the center of mass in relationship to where it started. Leaning back, leaning at the hips, the ankle. If we have the same relative location of the landing, we can see we're already biasing further back versus closer forward. This is all about that relationship, all about the distance. Now when it comes to the landing and loading, the foot out in front, Boss Betty out in front, this is where it's at. Where's CEO Clio? Where's the center of mass? Leaning back, here. Leaning forward a little bit more, but hinging at the hips, a little further forward, this center of mass. Versus appropriately leaning at the ankle, hinging at the ankle. Now look how much closer it is to the foot, the base of support, and the center of mass. This is what it's all about. Minimizing as much as possible braking without sacrificing the foot, the distance, and bringing it closer. We're merely leaning the body forward and letting the landing happen. Mo distance, mo braking. It's all about this. How can we get the two closer together? So let's bring this thing home. Again, if we're imagining a fixed center of mass, if we're merely just talking about the goal is landing as close as possible to our body, the heel is closest to our body, to our center of mass. That part of the foot is closest to me. Versus making contact with the whole foot or the midfoot, parts of the foot are further away from my center of mass, braking more. Versus forefoot, even further away. And this is with a fixed center of mass. So the goal, and therefore main point number 1, is landing on the heel helps to maximize forward momentum when appropriately leaning. When there's appropriate relationship between center of mass and base support, the heel is closest to the center of mass, slowing the least. This is the phase we're talking about, the taxis. Let's go on to the next part. Before we do, where were we at? Where are we going? Here's back to our schematic. We were just talking about the taxes. Have to pay taxes. We went from most amount of taxes to least. Now we're going to talk about the payment going towards the house. Are we paying on the principal? Are we paying on the interest? This is going to have to do with explaining our main point number 2 about how heel striking maximizes forward horizontal